right, good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Williams, and I am the Strategic Volunteer Engagement Manager here at Trident United Way. First off, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We are very, very excited for this webinar, and I'm happy to say that this is webinar number 3. And it's virtually back to reality. We have Chris Taylor with us today from Boomtown. He is the Director of Human Resources, and he has volunteered his time to present this wonderful information to share with you all today. So a big welcome to Chris Taylor as well. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please try and avoid multitasking if you can. I know that's hard to do in a virtual space. We're all in our own homes, in our own quiet offices, so it's easy for us to get distracted, but we definitely want you to get the most out of this webinar. So if you can please try and avoid those multitasking tendencies. And of course, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box to the right. We will allow Chris Taylor to present his entire webinar at the beginning, at the first half, and then we will spend time with a Q&A session at the end to answer all of those questions. So please feel free to drop them in at any time. And just a little quick summary of Trident United Way if you are new to our vision. So we strive to be the leader in uniting our community to improve lives. And we do these in 3 impact areas of education, financial stability, and health. We've seen that the better educated an individual is, the more prepared they tend to be to support themselves in their future without having to rely on public or private assistance. We also understand that financial stability tends to lead to healthier choices and decision making. So it all comes full circle on ensuring that everyone has equal opportunity to improve their lives. So moving the spotlight right on over, today's discussion, we are gonna, Chris is gonna talk about Boomtown, of course, dive deep into virtually back to reality, and then followed up by the Q&A session. So Chris, I will pass it off to you and allow you to share your screen.
Okay, sounds good. Here comes the show my screen. So let me get over there. And Kelly, have you got that screen now?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Well, hello everybody, and thank you for taking some time this morning. I was excited about the opportunity a few weeks ago when we talked about what might the future look like, and thinking through ways that we could share some of what we're doing at Boomtown with you. So I look forward to sharing my thoughts, and then even more so look forward to hearing your thoughts or questions as we get into that portion of the webinar. So I thought I would go with a good Southern phrase here. Y'all come back now. And a lot of people are not ready to come back now. We're actually not back in the office yet. So when will we be? That's going to be a different answer for lots of different people. Some are already back in their workplace. So as we think about that, how do we return to normal? And beyond that, even, how do we return to a new normal? What we come back to will not be the exact same thing that we left. So let me give you a bit of background on me. I will run through this quickly, and I hope you don't get lost through my zigzags here. Here's a little key at the bottom for those of you who are map oriented. That'll take you on a quick journey and give you some background on who I am. I'm from Louisiana, born there, raised there, and got my first upper education there at Louisiana Tech in business management and human resources. From there, I went to Columbia, South Carolina for my master's degree. I met my future wife while there. Was recruited into General Motors and moved to Detroit. Did various jobs in Detroit at headquarters and in some of the plants, including Flint and the Detroit Cadillac plant. And then went overseas to Seoul, Korea, where GM was acquiring Daewoo Motors. At the end of that assignment, came back across the pond and married my graduate school sweetheart. We then went on assignment together to Melbourne, Australia, to GM's Holden Motors. We had our first baby there, a son. We then moved to Spain for the next assignment and had another son. We then moved to Shanghai and had a daughter, and then back to Korea to run all of the HR operations for the now GM Korea. And somewhere along the way, we realized that all of these moves, a baby follows all of them, and we stopped that pattern this time back in Korea. So after that, came back to the US, decided that we wanted to kind of slow our lives down, that we wanted to settle somewhere near the coast. We picked Charleston, set up my wife's business here. I took on a bit of a role as Mr. Mom, but commuted back and forth to Detroit for almost 3 years. And then I left GM after I finished up a project that I was doing there and joined the nonprofit world at Seacoast Church. Their head of HR and talent development, was there about 3 years, and then came to Boomtown, doing a lot of what I was doing at Seacoast, which is setting up HR and change management and organization development. So that's where I currently am. And when I talk a bit about who we are at Boomtown, we are a real estate and software company. We support real estate brokers and agents. And we have over 350 employees, part-time, full-time, different types of employees. We have offices in Charleston, that's where our headquarters is, about 270 employees here, Atlanta, San Francisco, San Diego, and a Fort Mill office, which really helps us leverage the Charlotte market for call centers. And then we have a number of employees scattered across the United States who are customer contact agents. We call them client concierge team members, and they're permanently remote. So they operate in their homes across the United States. Here's a different view of us and where we're spread out. And then here's just an overview of our core values at Boomtown. Go for it, seek and share your knowledge, stay humble, do more with less, do the right thing, create amazing experiences, spread some laughter, have some fun along the way, communicate openly and honestly. When I talk about what we have done, how COVID has impacted Boomtown, I tried to just summarize this into just 2 slides, and that's where we'll focus our time today. And I'll try to expand on any thoughts and keep my eyes open as well for any chat questions that may come in. As probably was the case with many of you, in March, we closed our offices. We anticipated that something was coming, and we began doing a practice drill, having everybody take their laptops. We had just a few people who didn't have laptops, so we got some assigned to them. And we're right in the progress of doing a 2-day split. So this half of folks will go home on Monday, work from home. This half will go home on Tuesday. What happened is the Monday crowd went out, and then no one came back on Tuesday. So we were able to have every single one of our employees work remotely, and that was a true benefit of being in a high-tech environment. We turned the challenge into an opportunity and said, if we can't do this, then who could possibly do this? So jumped into the remote mental mindset. That relied very heavily on virtual tools. Some of the ones that we use are in the Google suite. We use Google Drive. And if you're not familiar with Google Drive, there are, plenty of platforms out there that compete with it and do many of the same things. But Google Drive lets us have our versions of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, surveys, whatever we need to use, websites, and we can collaborate real time. So if I'm typing in a document that I'm working on with my team, they can be in there with real time updates and saved histories. Google Meet, our version of video software, the one that we've selected, we have used every day. When I talk about my own team, we have had morning meetings to kick our days off. We have those at 9 o'clock. Sometimes they may be 10 minutes, sometimes they could be an hour. But that is a time for us to come together, get the day started, talk about what we have going on, brush our teeth, brush our hair, maybe put on a nice shirt and potentially be wearing shorts underneath the table, but to get on and moving. We then also utilize Slack. It's just more of a chat and communications tool. We can have various channels in there, and then one-on-one, real-time, if you will, instant messenger type communications. And Pingboard. Pingboard is our org chart tool, and it is also a calendar tool. So if anybody needs to take time off, we have an open vacation policy. We do not have a limit on vacation after someone's been with us for a year, but this lets people say, hey, I'm not in the office, but I'm working, or I need to take a couple hours off this afternoon, or I'm on vacation. So that came in really handy across all of our employees, just being able to look in and check, have it populate right into our Google calendars, who's available, who's not. Strict building standards. We locked the building down. We basically taped it off, not physically, and let people know that each of our offices would be closed. Some of our office locations are in shared workspaces, such as San Diego, and those overall buildings were closed. But we said, hey, should they reopen, our offices are still closed until we know more. And we began about a month ago, we surveyed our folks and said, is there anything that you need? I guess it's been closer to a month and a half ago. And everyone had their laptops, they had whatever they had grabbed, but some said, I'd love to have my laptop stand. I'd love to have my ergonomic chair. So we organized a pickup day. We did it a morning session and afternoon session where people could come in. We had gathered their things. We were in our protective gear at that time completely, and they just came through the parking lot and picked those things up. So that helped a number of our employees, but we also began to hear people saying, I'd really like to get back to the office. I would like to return to work. I think I can be more productive. We were in a situation where no one's role was essential in terms of you must be in the office. And so we held that standard. And fortunately, very fortunately, we had no layoffs. We had no reductions in our workforce. Our business has dipped. Other pieces of it have held steady. That's all based on the knowledge that people will again buy homes and sell homes. So we've had to do some creative work with customers, and of course we have lost some along the way, just as the economy has suffered and been impacted. But we have not to date laid off any Boomtown employees. With that said, we were able to keep the business running virtually. So when we started to talk about let's get back to the office, we were also able to say it's not the same sense of urgency that we would need to have if we were public facing, required in that office to make things run. So we had no desire to be the first people to open our doors just so that we could say we did. We took the approach that regardless at this point of anyone's view on COVID, we're treating it as the pandemic that it's been. We're returning to work from a pandemic. We're returning to work from our first ever pandemic, and we will visibly err on the side of caution. So that is where we are now. Let me talk to you about the plans from here. Oh, sorry, I actually put in a bonus slide, what we learned. Let me talk about that first. We learned that we've got to adjust as the world adjusts. We didn't control everything that was going on in our county, community, state, country. So we had to adjust. And leadership truly is head and heart. We spent time organizing, having group meetups. We organized a website, an internal website that our people could use and hear messages, pick up resources, learn what they might need to do for health screenings, hear from the CEO and other leadership team members, and have a channel to communicate back on, one of those being the Slack channel I mentioned earlier. We also took on an initiative with the talent team, that's what we call our HR group, to start making personal contact with every single employee. And we kept a log of that when we did it, just to say, I've talked to this person, I happened to be in a conference call with them, or I checked in on them, or I asked if they needed anything. Because we realized that this situation was very different for different people. Some people were home, like myself, trying to run homeschool, two working parents, three very energetic children. And some days I might complain about that, but there's another person who is completely alone during this. There's another person who's trying to raise a toddler, either on their own or with another working parent, and. So lots of different situations. But I love that the leadership team did take the view that this truly is head and heart. We had to understand that we could only control what we could control, and we had to lay that out. And we did leadership sessions where we talked with managers about controlling the controllable. And if ever I can share those resources, anything on the circles of control or concern, I would be happy to do that if you want to reach out to Kelly and ask for those. Again, as I said, everybody had hard days, everybody banged heads on walls, but where and when possible, we flipped the challenges into opportunities, truly believing that powerful cliche that necessity is the creator of all invention. And we looked for lots of opportunities to talk very openly, to not only say, when can we get back and what will that look like, but to go further and say, does everybody have to come back? What if not everybody wanted to come back? What if some people never came back but worked virtually and remotely? Let's explore those opportunities. Let's do some brainstorming. And instead of saying why we can't do it, let's look at how we could if we wanted to. I do believe our world will move more and more and more virtually, hopefully never completely virtually, so that we'll still have interaction, but we will see more of it. We will see more of it as technology increases, expectations increase. We'll see more of it as the incoming generations come out of more virtual learning systems. And I think the further that we get into a service-based culture, we're going to see opportunities where people say, just like they do with us, I'm a full-time dad or a full-time mom, but I've got 6 hours, 3 days a week that I would love to be doing some work. And we have opportunities for people to do those things. So I think we'll see growing opportunities. And the question then becomes, do we want to be on the front end of that, helping define and change course as we learn? Do we want to be in the middle, or do we want to be on the other end and catch up? For us, we'd like to be on the front end, but wise in what we do. Our performance did remain strong. That's the thing we learned across our teams. We talked with managers early on and said, what was 100 yesterday may be 75 tomorrow. People are dealing with different things. They are adjusting. So just be clear on your expectations, and you can ratchet some of those back. Some of the things that feel critical are not critical. So give yourself and your team a time to adjust. There may be days when people can only give 25% if they're dealing with hard situations, family issues. And then there are days that it may feel like they're giving 110%, and we saw every bit of this. One of the things that I saw with my own team that I want to think about, how do we replicate when we return to the office, is that through the interactive tools that we had, we have a number of projects. We're putting in a new compensation system. We have just redone benefits, a new human resources information system, and a number of other things. And so we're kind of dividing and conquering, me working with the leads on my team for their work, and then we're coming together, the human resources business partners, to look at those things. What I found was that for Natalie on my team, maybe 10 o'clock at night was a really good time for her to work, and 9 o'clock when her toddler was up and running was not a good time. For me, I prefer to start my day usually around 5 a.m. and that is my best work time. My house is quiet and I do my best thinking. So being able to work, and again, this is more the project-based work, when it suits us, tended to be a very good learning. So we didn't need to wait until we could all get together in a conference room, but people could come together in these 9 o'clock calls where we were virtually face to face and understand who's doing what and what we're going after, and then do it in their own time and have a way to say, okay, here's where I am. I think that's the same thing if any of you work globally. It's what you have to depend on while Europe is working, America's waking up, Asia is sleeping, etc. So opportunities there. And then if you take any class on leadership, groups of peopleship, we always come back to the same thing, and we tend to find the same thing, that the number one thing that could always be better in any organization is communication. And we try not to lose sight of that. But what was so important was that we had to communicate, communicate, communicate. We find ourselves in a different time now with all that is currently going on in the world. And I'm sure that, I hope, will be an additional discussion for people leaders, for team members, for anyone who wants to begin joining in and talking more about things that are going on. But for Boomtown, we know that while we're getting ready to go into our action planning of returning folks to work, that's my next slide that I'll show in a moment, we also have to be very mindful that the world significantly changed again. And so we're working virtually now to manage that. So I wanted to address that, and also to say that I'm sure a number of you have responsibilities in your organization as well, where you have been working full steam on COVID and all things COVID. And now you're having to consider, getting to consider, needing to consider anything else going on in the world. So we have decided that we will have multiple phases of returning to our office. The first one, it might be 2 phases, it might be 3. But a phase 1 is a 30-day at minimum phase that will begin on June 17th. That is our plan. It would be for Charleston, starting with Charleston. We have said that no returns are mandatory at this point. We surveyed our Charleston population of about 270 and asked them, what are your thoughts on returning to the office? And so we had a Likert scale of absolutely cannot wait, all the way down to no, not at this point. I would not feel comfortable. And we dug a bit more in that survey to understand, if you were a person who said, I cannot wait, ready to get back, when are you ready to get back? Be a bit more specific, June, July, August. And we saw several on the higher end of that bell curve in the positive ranges who said, I want to come back, saying, I'd love to come back in June. Then we found an interesting tidbit. We said, how many days would you want to be in the office? And this was kind of across the board. But this was right in the center of the bell curve. People said 3. The resounding answer was 3, and that 3 might be COVID, and that 3 might be ongoing for some of our people. So when we took 1 and 2, 1 being I'm ready yesterday, 2 being I'm very likely to be ready to come back to the office. I can be a bit more patient, but I'm ready. We had around 50 people, 58 to be specific, that said they wanted to come back. And we said, that's great, because 50 is what we had targeted, a number that we felt we could comfortably manage, again, given that our business is not going to shut down if people are not in the office. So we want to look at this as a beta phase. There's a lot that we want to learn. We cannot eradicate anything, but we can be smart and sensible. So if you wear that HR hat, or if you wear the hat of the person who needs to think about facilities, responsibilities, you can go out and almost get overwhelmed with information. Here are some of the tips that I would share with you. I did go to OSHA and CDC, and as you read OSHA, that language has been fairly consistent over the years, that it's saying we have a responsibility, we have a duty as an employer to keep our people safe. Now, that is a very simplified version of what they're saying. There is language on things that are harder to control, airborne illnesses, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the best advice that I saw that we began to use, instead of arguing about, is this kind of mask or that kind of mask, what we did was said, let's go virtually first and sit and talk about how will an infection spread through this office. So let's put aside the work of the researchers and not get caught in that, but let's be super sleuths and say, should that virus come with me to work, how will it spread? And it changed the thinking. So we're looking around now thinking surfaces, okay? We know that that could be a problem. We know airborne spread, if people are too close, we've heard that can be a problem. And those are the two main things that we know. So we really started thinking through that, understanding that even before we went out, we were encouraging a lot more hand washing, wiping down, etc. When we started thinking through how we're bringing those 50 people back, we found that most of our workstations are already distanced, on average 7 feet apart, but we do have some that are not. And so we looked at those workstations, and the decision that we made was we will do a staggered schedule in this phase one. Now, I could say that it's only because of COVID, but it's also, as I said, a chance to go further and think outside the box and think about the future. So for those employees who came in our sales area, as you might expect, a ton of people could not wait to come back to work because that's where the extroverts live. I'm one of those extroverts, just not a salesperson. In our engineering and development side, people said, I have never worked better in my whole life because I'm not being interrupted. So not nearly as many people saying I need to get back to that office. As they come back, though, it will be staggered. And so in a place like sales, some of those people will be Monday, Wednesday people, and some of those people will be Tuesday, Thursday. We're not going to have the office open on Fridays for phase one. And we have worked through cleaning precautions. We're upping our cleaning contract, but we're also depending on our people to go back to one of the core values and do the right thing. And so a phrase that we're beginning to use is erase the trace. And just keep that in mind, because day 27 has got to be, until things change, just as important as day one. And hopefully an offshoot of all of this work will be less flu and cold and stomach virus and you name it down the road. But erase the trace. Clean it before you touch it, clean it after you touch it, and just get into that mindset. The holdup on our date that kept us from going earlier in June is we decided we must have a month's worth of essential cleaning supplies. And at that point, we did not have enough spray disinfectant and we did not have enough sanitizing wipes. Those are handled, touch wood, now. And so we're targeting the date of the 17th. And so much of this for us boiled down to the do the right thing. We treat our people as the responsible adults that they all are. We look at our team members as people who pay bills, maintain a mortgage, have been to college, raise kids, fix cars, you name it. And so we always like to start with that. Now, when you have masses of humans, as many of you know, if you're playing ever in this HR or people space or managing anything, you do need guidelines, because if you don't, my earnest opinion of what is best or the right thing to do in a situation just may not match up with your earnest opinion of what is best or right to do. So we're doing some tiebreaker work in advance. All of our people who raised their hands to be a part of that 50 are going to start getting Google Forms. That's a survey and some follow-up information about returning to the office. They will need to sign off on some baseline expectations. They all know that, hey, if this seems over the top, or if you feel uncomfortable that it's not enough, do not come back right now. So that is clearly spelled out, and it will be given to all of our folks. And then there are key reminders about not only watching out for yourself, but watching out for others, and remembering people fall across a very broad spectrum. And so our goal is not to come in and debate what anyone believes on COVID, but to educate, to be safe, and to protect the most concerned, using that as our focus, the most concerned of our people. Now, obviously, the most concerned of our people will not be back in phase one, and we're comfortable with that. My thought would be that, assuming all goes well, we would see more of an influx of people returning around the September timeframe. So I would love to stop there, and having shared that with you, and open up for any questions. And I assume those would come through the chat. And Kelly, I think you've already received some, so I'd love to do my best at answering those.
Yes, we do have a few questions for you. Let me just switch this up real quick. All right, so the first question that we have that came through are, do you have any suggestions for potential burnouts during virtual back to reality?
I believe that, some of the conversation that we've had has been a ramp up, and really think of that as drawing out a ramp and understanding that it's probably not a good idea to try to go from 0 to 60. So that's another piece of this, hey, a couple of days back in the office, and it might be more limited hours that you're coming back into the office. I think that's one important thing. The other thing that we began to discuss last week is, in watching vacation, again, we don't limit it, but people are not taking it. And that's, it can make sense. Some people are saying, well, I'm just sitting at home, there's nowhere that I can go. But we're going to begin encouraging people that before we're back into full swing anything, please take some time to renew and refresh. We're going to be talking about volunteer days, other kinds of days, no questions asked days, but to start thinking about that exact question, let people create some margin, ramp back up, and hit the refresh button. I'm happy to go further into that question if anybody wants to send more over in the chat.
We'll give them time and then move on to the next question. The next question was, do you feel like your company culture has improved or changed in any way by going fully virtual?
I do feel that it has changed. The first thing that we noticed is everybody in the company then got to see through the eyes of the permanently remote folks. There was a new dynamic in meetings, and we did encourage video camera with the Google Meet, so we're not just on the phone, so that we actually are looking at each other, meeting, understanding. That virtually only situation created a new kind of culture, or let's just say amended the culture that we had, because people had to slow down and think more clearly. And I think primarily that's because anytime you're taking in new information, you're going over into that center inside of the brain that you have to open back up. So think of it as something as simple as, if I ask you this week to go home and eat with the other hand, try that today. Like, literally go and do that. And when you're doing that, you're not on autopilot. The reticular activator up in the brain is not on autopilot. So you're open to new ways. That period of, okay, here's something different. It's all the same players. It's most of the same work, but we're doing it differently. Is where I think we're most conducive after about the age of 8 years old to take in new information and new ways of doing something. So I throw that out there to say, yes, I think this is and has been a great chance to impact the culture. And if you're steering your culture as best you can't create culture and you can't dictate culture, but you can encourage it, influence it, and steer it. This is a very good opportunity to do so. So that's one thing that we saw. People were slowing down, taking more time. People were having to speak up more for what they needed in terms of, hey, this is a gray area, but I take care of a parent, or I'm having to do things with my kids. And managers really had to, and will still have to, have a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift is, I've got to start looking at quality versus quantity. Now, some of our work is quantity based. It is measured, always has been. How long was that conversation? How good is that satisfaction score? But other things, when you don't have people sitting right around you, when you have your entire workforce working from home, you have to put clear expectations and you have to give trust and you have to allow people to utilize that trust and then adjust from there. But the baseline of that is you have to know what you're looking for from them, not just how much face time you're looking for from them. So I think that is going to serve us quite well as we go forward, because we may see more situations where people work partially or fully remote, some people.
Great. And the next question is, do you have virtual training and development activities planned? And if so, how will you accomplish them remotely?
We do. There is a training manager on my team, and she's done a fantastic job. Natalie's background was, she was a trainer, but her original role in Boomtown was training our clients on how to use the software, how to do the things they need to do. And so she led a team that did that, and we pulled her over into HR to say, we're no longer 20 people. You know, we're nearing 400 people. So we need a better concerted effort to work with our folks. So we have done monthly, we've tried to have an event with all people leaders, and then we've had one-off events with team members, and those have been via virtual training. There's a tool that I use called the New Leader Transition. Sometimes we call it a team transition, but it's one that if someone is new to leading a team, within the first 90 days, we like for them to go through the New Leader Transition. It's where the leader gets a set of questions to think about. What do I know about this team? What do I want to know about them? What are my concerns? What am I excited about? What are my key expectations of the team members? The team members go off and they have some of the same questions, but they come together without the leader. And they talk through those questions. What do we want to know about the leader? What are we concerned about? What did we have here that we want to keep? What would we like to get rid of? And it surfaces your issues, usually a year or so ahead of time. The reason I use that example is we did one of those virtually. Now, I don't think it was as optimal as being in person. When you bring those team members in, and later in the day, they're then joined by the leader, and the leader addresses all of their questions and issues. And it can be very powerful, and it still was, but it was a challenge for something like that. But we did prove that, yes, we can still do that. And if we have a team lead in Atlanta or some other place, we don't always have to wait until we can get on an airplane to go and help them. We are rolling out a number of learning opportunities this year for team members and for people leaders. So I'll talk about those. Where and when possible, we want to do those in person, but we've done at least one a month for our people who lead people. We've talked through the same circles of control. We've talked about communication style. We've talked a bit about conflict resolution. We're going to be talking more about that. And we want to set those up where they can be virtual so that, again, we can get real time to people who are not in the Charleston area. The other thing is when you go into any kind of learning, you remember a small percentage of what you've learned. We'd like for things to be available on demand, either for someone who could not be in the training or for someone who says, I remember this one good concept, but I'd like to go back to it. So yes, lots of opportunities, and I get excited talking about the future of our learning and development.
Awesome. And we have a couple more that are in queue. The next one is, are there any specific team building activities that your teams have enjoyed and really appreciated when connecting virtually?
Yeah, lots of fun things. By opening that Google site, which is really just a homemade website that our HR team worked on, I got to tell you, when you work for a high-tech firm of people who build websites for a living, it can be a little bit intimidating to say, let me show you this nice homemade site that we put together to help everyone communicate. But we did. And we began funneling out resources, chat opportunities. One of the things that came up was Boomtown Bingo. People really enjoyed that. Things that I've, done in a conference call. I've checked on another person. Someone's reached out and checked on me. Different people gravitated towards different things. We have had a number of virtual happy hours across the business. So done that with my team. Enjoyed those. People have done games. They've done catch up. They've given tours of their home offices. There were photos galore out there of here's what my work day looks like. I put a piece out on Meet My Neighbor because my next door neighbor happens to work for Boomtown as well. And leaders then had some sessions and encouragement out there for folks. I would say the single greatest motivating tool that we had out there was Slack. And it's just a chance to talk without me having to call you up or having to talk to you one-on-one, me talking with you and you being able to shoot something back without 100 extra emails.
Great. And Chris, do you mind explaining a little further about the Boomtown Bingo and what you guys did with that?
Yeah, the bingo was just a bingo sheet, and I saw different versions of it, but it was you manage your own sheet and you yell bingo, and you get absolutely nothing except cheers and accolades. And people had fun doing it. So I would need to go back and look at the exact sheet, but it might be something like I never got out of my pajamas 2 days this week. I fell asleep during a conference call. That was not on there, but I think it'd be a great one to put on. My kids have interrupted, or I needed to go and tend to them. It could be, as I said, I checked on a team member. I reached out to somebody that I've not yet had the chance to meet. I contacted one of our new employees because we have continued to hire people in those customer service, those concierge type roles. So it was just a number of things. And when you got your line diagonally up and down, left to right, you could yell bingo out in Slack. One thing I'd amend to that, Kelly, aside from the bingo, is there were a few small situations for different events and different things that were going on with people. One that I'll highlight is team members who really went above and beyond and got called out by other team members on limited occasions, given that we have been having to really watch budget. We would send food over, or we would send an Uber Eats card or some other type of gift card to employees, or some little trinket of something they could celebrate that would arrive at their door.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like it's fun to work over there.
It is. If you get the chance, come and visit us. Anybody, if we can make it happen. Not right now because you're not pre-approved to come into the building, and I'm holding firm on that. We are a pet-friendly workplace, and if people have their dogs, vaccinated, everything up to date, they bring them. They can't bring them during phase one, but you'll see pets. You'll see sometimes maybe somebody riding a skateboard through the office. It's kind of like a baby Google. That's what I felt when I first walked into Boomtown.
That's great. And this is the last question that I see, but if you guys, we have a few more minutes, so if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. But this person wants to know, what are some ways an HR manager can make employees feel at ease returning to the workplace?
I think the most important thing that you must do is put on your employee advocate hat and give people channels to tell you if they are uncomfortable. And so I'm fortunate on my team that we have multiple HR team members. We're different people. Somebody can go to anybody they feel safe with. We've been very clear to say no pressure. The worst reason to be coming back to work is because you feel guilty that you're not, as long as you're getting your work done. I think the survey helped a ton. And we tried not to overcomplicate it, but to say you can stay completely anonymous unless you're wanting to come back in this first round, then we need to know who you are. But, how do you feel about this? And how concerned would you be? Even for those coming back in phase one, we're doing work with managers. Managers are not required to come back. Not one person in Boomtown is mandated to come back. So we're beginning to address some of the concerns that some employees may feel, and really working with leaders to overemphasize to their people, no questions asked. People are going to be across a different spectrum. We've utilized the EAP. We've talked about that. We've reminded people of that. We've had lots of free sessions that people have scoured and shared just as resources. And we tried to keep the lines of communication open to say, what is on your mind? What concerns do you have? So advice for others, I think that is so important. If you can, let people come in partially and begin ramping up. Start before you have to, if you can safely, so that you have the extra time to allow people to do this a bit more carefully, more slowly, especially those that need to, and ramp their way up, and do anything that you can to get the spoken and unspoken peer pressure, if you will, out of the organization. Because you may have people who, hey, Chris, wake up, get up, time to go back to work. But you're going to have a lot more people who show up every day and show up seeking to do the right thing. And you're just going to have to use situational leadership and understand that their needs, their concerns, their excitements, et cetera, are different. Can I elaborate further on that, or did that touch that question?
I think that was perfect. If anyone else has any more comments, they can drop them in the chat box real quick. I'll give it just a second.
And as that's going on, Kelly, can I yield back to you? I know you had some additional things you wanted to share, and I'm happy to pick up any more questions that come in while you're doing that.
No, I didn't have anything other to share. That pretty much sums up everything. And I don't see anyone with any more questions in the chat box, but I do see a lot of praises. So thank you so much, Chris, for hosting this webinar today. We really appreciate it. And I know I learned a lot, and from what I'm seeing in the chat box, so did everyone else. So you can't hear the applause, but it's there.
Hey, I appreciate it. And what I would say is anything, take what you like, anything that you can use, and leave what you don't. This is kind of our story, our journey. And again, if I can be of any help along the way, please reach out through Kelly. So best of luck and health to all of you. And thank you, Kelly.
Great. Thanks again, Chris. So stay tuned for our next session. We will have a session 4 webinar coming in July, and we are happy to share those details with you. Everyone that signed up on the SurveyMonkey addressed if they would like to be notified of these. We definitely will make sure everyone that is interested gets notice of our session 4. There is a short survey that's following this. If you guys don't mind filling that out, that is super helpful for us for future webinars. So again, you will get that right after signing out of this webinar. And that is it. Thank you all for joining.